Hello, everyone. My channel is about emerging markets most of the time. And I think people are always curious about what is an emerging market, right? I have a podcast called Time for Emerging Markets Towards Within Emerging Markets. You can check that out. It's on Spotify, Apple, as well as on Anchor, which is the platform that I host the episodes. And by the way, if you want to start a podcast, Anchor is a place for you. It's very simple to use, and it's very. I think it's made specifically for people that have very great ideas to share, or want to create a platform where they can um, provide knowledge to a specific audience or what you are passionate about, right? So one of the things I'm really passionate about is emerging markets, and my YouTube channel is about that. Most of the time, I do transpose some of um, the interviews I have for investors and entrepreneurs in emerging markets onto my YouTube channel. So you can check that out as well. So this in this video, I really want to watch a video you guys kind of explains what emerging markets are for most of you, or maybe some of you, or a few of you guys who are wondering what emerging markets are. So I think this would be a great video to watch, and I'll probably explain, what my thoughts are thereafter. So this one, CNBC explains.
And with countries like India, Brazil, and Russia.
Countries are crucial when it comes to driving global economic growth. And their financial markets can be gold mines for investors, especially those with an appetite for higher risks. So, what is an emerging market today, and why do investors have such a love-hate relationship with them? The term emerging markets was coined by World Bank employee Antoine van Atmaal. The finance arm of the World Bank wanted to get more foreign investment into third world countries, but didn't think the term third world really inspired investors. To make it sound more attractive, Van Atmaal coined the term emerging markets. But if you want a definitive list of emerging markets, good luck. The list varies depending on who you ask. The IMF classifies 96 countries.
I think that's a very interesting, example of how, first of all, how the word emerged, but most importantly, come up with a list that that really, explain what emerging market is. There are many different lists out there, but the International Monetary Fund is well respected. It has a good reputation. So let's see what it says.
As emerging. It uses criteria such as how much citizens of that country earn, how diverse the country's exports are, and how sophisticated its financial system is. That's one measure, but investment research firm MSCI, which creates stock indexes, classifies 24 countries as emerging markets.
So just to add on here, MSCI is, I think, it's pretty good. I used that when I was studying for my Masters of Science in Finance program at Babson College, and I really like the countries listed here, right? So I've been fortunate enough to be in Korea, I think Taiwan, I think what else? Yeah, Thailand too. So I think I think this is a pretty good list, I would say. So but I just want to mention MSCI too is a well repeatable platform to kind of get some really good information on emerging markets.
Okay, but what's an index? Essentially, it's a list of stocks that measure certain features. For example, if you want to look at how the biggest US companies are doing, you could look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which covers 30 household names. The MSCI is known for its Emerging Markets Index, which shows us how emerging countries like Brazil, China, and Turkey are doing. Unlike the IMF, the MSCI uses how investable a country's stock market is to determine whether it's an emerging market. That's important because this influences how much foreign investment a country can get. You may be wondering how such a diverse group of countries could possibly be grouped together.
Despite their many differences, there are a few characteristics that they do tend to have in common.
Let's take a look at the first one. The term emerging markets was initially used for developing countries, which meant that the average person living there tends to earn less than someone in a developed country. Economists call this a lower income per capita. But that's not always true today. Some countries like the United Arab Emirates and South Korea are considered emerging markets, but they have higher income per capita than some developed countries like Spain.
Yeah, just to not to kind of interrupt the flow, but I think it's very important because I think South Korea, when I visited South Korea last 2 years ago, 2019, I think it begged the question like this South Korea an emerging market because at this point in time, South Korea is considered the fifth largest economy. And for them to be considered an emerging market is pretty interesting. But I think thereafter, after watching the video, it'll be, you can see kind of the perspective of how an emerging market, South Korea might still be considered an emerging market, even though it's right up there for one of the largest economies in the world as of 2018 when the video was made.
And Portugal.
An investor's goal is to make money. For that, you need growth. And emerging markets are known to do just that rapidly.
Fast growth is our second characteristic. One report found that 1 out of every 4 emerging economies outperformed its peers and developed countries. Of these 18 outperformers, 7 exceeded annual per capita GDP growth of 3.5% for a 50-year period. They include China, South Korea, and Indonesia. The other 11, which include India, Ethiopia, and Cambodia, have enjoyed more recent gains, growing at about 5% or higher over the past 20 years. That's 3.5 percentage points above the US, and enough to lift themselves into a new income bracket for countries.
That growth comes with a lot of risk, and that brings us to our next characteristic: high volatility.
And if you need an example of volatility, just look at this. The MSCI index, which shows total returns, shows emerging markets had been doing pretty well until January 2018, when things began to sour.
We've seen their currencies fall to a
So just to, she's touching on the third point of what concerns, what we consider as emerging markets. And I think this is very interesting because, there's this high volatility is really attributed to emerging markets, and and that's something that, as she mentioned earlier, FDI, foreign direct investment, is one of the ways that in this context that define emerging markets. So it's very interesting, and I have a good friend, Kevin Richardson, that I went to my finance program, my Master's of Science Finance program at Babson College, and he actually wrote a very great paper. I'm just shameless plug to him, but and I was fortunate to have him on my podcast. The volatility is something that's, his paper gave a really good understanding of, or a very good, FDI, the correlation between how FDI and countries' GDP increase, mostly emerging markets, and he speaks better about he knows more about his paper than I, and you can actually listen to the episode on my pod. His name is Kevin Richardson. So it's very interesting, and I think volatility is one of those things that is really attributed to emerging markets. Just wanted to see that out there, and I think she's gonna explain more about it now.
Historic lows against the US dollar. That's bad news for countries trying to pay off their debt.
It's a problem because a lot of that debt is held in foreign currencies, particularly in the strengthening US dollar. That makes paying off debts an uphill battle. Not ideal when emerging markets have seen their total debt rise from $21 trillion in 2000.
So this is very important because if you're starting a VC fund or any investment vehicles to invest in emerging markets, then one of the questions you have to ask yourself is what's the currency exchange rate, right? And sometimes, US dollar is considered like the universal, not the universal, the currency that most other currencies benchmark on. But I think this is a very key point, because to really build a venture firm in Africa, you have to really understand the currency volatility, but also how does that benchmark against the US dollar, right? So just to point out there.
$7 to $63 trillion in 2017. Emerging markets crises are worrying because they affect multiple countries and tend to work in a vicious cycle. First, the currency falls rapidly. Countries then struggle to raise funds due to their less mature capital markets, and investors flee. This affects the country's assets and currency, and can sometimes damage the country's banking system and even the economy.
It's important to note that an emerging market status can come and go.
That could mean a step up as a developed nation, or a step back as a frontier nation. Despite all the uncertainty, one thing is for sure.
I think a very good word that she brought is frontier. So some people, frontier market is a different conversation, and sometimes it might overlap with the emerging market. So frontier markets, sometimes they're used interchangeably, but I think, from my perspective, I think they're different. And I think, something that I should mention, like, if sometimes emerging markets, it comes and goes, and some people might fall back to frontier, or they might get advanced to the upper market. So the point is, don't even though you might see emerging interchange with frontier, they're not the same thing. They might, in some contexts, they are used the same, but fundamentally, I think emerging market has a different connotation based on what she has been saying in the video compared to frontier.
Investors will continue to watch emerging markets closely as the countries continue to expand their role in the global economy.
Hi everyone, it's Sinan. Thanks for watching.
So that is it. I think kind of the main takeaways is that, emerging markets really kind of stemmed from, redefining the meaning of developing markets, and he has been attributed to foreign direct investments, and high growth market, high risk markets, and basically just markets that they're at the pace where, that means relative to other markets, they grow faster, and one important thing that she mentions, like, there's not a single parameter that you measure emerging markets, but that well-respected platforms and organizations like the IMF and MSCI that kind of you can look at them as benchmarks on how to define emerging markets. So I hope this video explains what emerging markets are, and I hope that anytime I mention emerging markets in this channel or in the podcast, that I interview amazing entrepreneurs from India, some based in Namibia. The last interview I did was in Namibia. Kind of gives you some context of what emerging markets are. And please feel free to add your comments. What do you think of emerging markets? I'd love to hear from you guys, your thoughts on emerging markets in general. And if you are curious about that, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I'll be posting more videos like this. If you have any videos to recommend for me to talk about anything that has to do with emerging markets finance, please feel free to reach out to me, and don't forget to like the video if you found this useful. I hope you did, and I'm really I really get excited doing stuff like this, even though sometimes it might seem not excited, but I really love stuff like this. So please feel free to comment, like, subscribe, click the bell icon to get more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.